Natural law is God's law. It alone ensures the happiness of human beings. It shows them what they should do or should not do, and that they only suffer when they deviate from it. So, based on this answer, it's pretty simple, really. Like, that's how we get to happiness. That's how we achieve happiness, is if we follow God's law. And the only way we're going to suffer is if we deviate from that. So it seems pretty simple because we don't want to suffer. So it'd be pretty simple that we want to follow this natural law, God's law. But in practice, it becomes much more difficult to actually go through and constantly follow God's law when we're facing all the obstacles that we face during our lives. So then in the book, it sections off and gives us some characteristics of divine law. So I picked out a few of them for us to talk about. So divine law is eternal and unalterable. So just like God is eternal, and we know that God doesn't make mistakes, so God's law is also unalterable. It's not going to be changed because they're perfect the way they are. Which goes into the next one, that God's laws are perfect. So unlike human laws are imperfect and we constantly have to change them and update them to accompany the coming times and the new things that are happening, God's laws are perfect. So they're set in stone and don't need to be changed at all. All the laws of nature are divine laws. So since God created all things, the laws that govern nature are God's laws, which is seems self-explanatory, but sometimes we forget that everything that's happening in our lives, all the laws that govern nature, are from God and are divine laws. Divine laws are adapted to the special nature of each world. So there are different worlds that contain spirits of different evolutions and different points of advancement. And in these different worlds, there are different applications to divine law. So the divine law is the same, but how it applies to lesser evolved worlds is different to how it applies to worlds that are more evolved. But they're still set in stone and unalterable, but it just depends. Like, lesser evolved worlds are going to need more basic rules that are easy to follow, and as the world gets more advanced, there's going to be as the worlds get more advanced, they're more refined and more detailed oriented in their in how they're looking at divine law. One of the most important things in this section is, to me at least, is that God's law is written in the conscious. So God's law is with each and every one of us. All of us have a conscience, so all of us have God's law written with us. And so we all have it with us, but the problem is how we choose to use it, or how we open up and accept God's law, because oftentimes we just push that thought to the side and we don't think about it, but it's there with us and we just have to be open to using it and putting it into our daily lives. Jesus is the purest expression of divine law. So when we think of, if we have a physical model of what divine law really means, on earth, what we have is Jesus. Jesus is that example for us, that he's the highest moral perfection that we have witnessed. So it's like, that's our goal right there. Like, to get to that divine law, if we want to know what that means in kind of a physical way of thinking, it would be to get to how Jesus is, the way he was when he was on earth. And oftentimes, even though Jesus is this model for divine law, oftentimes Jesus' words were misinterpreted because he spoke in allegories and in stories. And that's why it's not so clear sometimes when people are reading Jesus' teachings, they get confused and they might interpret something differently. So that's why Spiritism came to kind of refine these laws and set them, like, write them out, because we were misinterpreting it through the stories, and now it's time for us to have a better understanding of it. And then they said, truth is like light. You must adjust to it gradually, otherwise it dazzles us. So also, they didn't just reveal all of this to us right at the beginning, all these teachings that we have now, because if we were less evolved than we are now, we wouldn't be able to understand it. And like they're saying, if the light just comes, it's just going to dazzle us, and we're not going to be able to interpret any of it or receive any of it. So we have to adjust to it gradually. So that's why we had people who came to set the way before Jesus to prepare us for the teachings that Jesus was going to bring. And then we had Jesus come and give us teachings in a simpler way. And now that we've evolved a little bit more, we can understand a more scientific and set in stone way of thinking that doesn't have any stories, but they're kind of telling us the facts. And still, there's still more that we need to improve so that we can learn even more that we still can't understand because we aren't at that point of evolution. So that's why Jesus told us everything, but in a simpler way, because we weren't ready for that. If he came and just told us all this, it would have dazzled us. So and then to make natural law easier to understand, as we were talking about how Spiritism is trying to make it easier to understand for people since we got so confused with Jesus' teachings and stories, they split up the natural law, divine law, into 10 little sub-laws. So worship, labor, reproduction, preservation, destruction, society, progress, equality, liberty, and then justice, love, and charity all in one category. So they split it up into these 10 so that we can better understand all the different concepts of divine law. But one thing that we can use to sum up all of divine law is to love our neighbors as ourselves. Because if we're able to love everyone as we love ourselves and want everything for everyone that we want for ourselves, then all of those other things will fall into place. All of those things come from if we're able to love one another, then all those other little laws will be also taken care of. And that's why the most important of these divisions is the last law of justice, love, and charity, because that goes into where you love your neighbors as yourself. And with that, you'll have the true expression of divine law or natural law. And they also split it up like this so that we have specific directions, because when it's vague, humans tend to misinterpret it and take different paths and makes mistakes. So they're saying, here's a clear-cut way that we can look at it so we can better understand it. So we're going to talk about each one of them briefly, and I only got a few points from each of them, and some of them are very detailed and very long, so it's only a few points, but some of the key points about these laws that if we followed would make our lives so much better. So the first one that they talk about is the law of worship. So they start off, the first question in that section is, what is worship? And oftentimes when we think of worship, we think of prayer or a church or a shrine or something physical and big and grand when we think of the word worship. But what the Spirit's answered is, worship is the elevation of thought towards the Creator. The soul gets closer to God through worship. So they didn't say anything about having some big elaborate form of worship. They're just saying that it's how we get closer to God and how we connect with God closer. So it doesn't have to be a big church or a big shrine or an elaborate prayer or anything like that. It's just how we connect to God. So one section within the law of worship is external worship. And so the first bullet they said is, true worship exists in the heart. So what that means, again, it doesn't matter where or how we worship, but that it's from the heart, that it's sincere. And it's okay if we do want to worship in public, if we go to church and worship, if we go to a center and worship, if we pray in public or pray with other people, as long as we have our heart going towards it, as long as we're sincerely worshiping, and it's from the heart and not just to show off to other people. The second point they have here is it's from the heart by doing good and avoiding wrongdoing. So it's also one thing to just be worshiping and to saying things and to admire God and praise God, but we also need to put those words into actions. And we need to start doing those things that we're saying or that we're asking for. If we're asking to get better at something, we have to also put in that effort to work hard and do it. So it's not only about saying it and doing some act of worship, but putting that into our daily lives. The next bullet is the intention determines the worth of the act. So again, even if we do a long, elaborate prayer every night, even if we go to the center all the time, it's not going to matter if our hearts are not in it, if our intents are not good. If we're only going so that people think we're good, doesn't make us good, because God knows our intent. Even if we are fooling everyone else, we're not fooling God. And the last one they said is more power to attract good spirits. So what they were talking about here is that when we're in a group of people who are in the same vibration, the same thoughts, and thinking the same, like-minded people, all gather together to worship, like in a place like our center, then we have more power to attract good spirits. That doesn't mean individually you can't worship on your own. Of course, that's still good, but when we're all together with those good vibrations and all attuned to the same thing, it makes it where we have a lot more power with that prayer, with that worship. And then they talked more detailed about prayer. Prayer is always pleasing to God when it comes from the heart and is offered with faith, passion, and sincerity. So it's, of course, like praying is always pleasing to God, right? We're thinking about God, knowing that God can help us, and trying to work through our problems in a good way. But of course, again, it has to be sincere. It has to be with faith and passion. We can't just be saying words because we're reciting them off the top of our head. And then they say a person who prays must do 3 things: praise, ask, and offer thanks. So here they're giving us these basic guidelines because they know humans, we still can't when they just give us an open space, we still make a lot of mistakes. So they're saying the 3 basic things we can do is praise, ask, and offer things. But other than that, it's up to us. It's up to us. It's our conversation with God. And it's up to what we're going to say, what our heart is feeling, what's applicable to us. So there's those simple guidelines for us, but the rest is just coming from our heart. And what matters is how you pray, not how much. So again, some people think that you have to pray a long prayer or a prayer that was in a book or a prayer that's so beautiful, but as long as it's from your heart and you truly mean it, then that's all that matters. And then to go with the picture, I have an example of from the Gospel according to Spiritism, that there's a man in the desert and he is lost and alone and has nowhere to go, and he's almost dying of dehydration at this point. So he falls on the ground and is there and can barely move, and he prays to God and says, please help me. I need to, I'm almost dying of dehydration. I need to find water or something. So then he prays, and then after a while, he gets an idea of following in one direction. Okay, I'm going to keep walking in this direction, and hopefully something comes up. And then he finds nearby there was this huge body of water that he could get the water from. And then it's one thing if afterwards he said, oh, I had a great idea. I'm so lucky that I chose to go in that direction. But we have to realize that that is how God is answering our prayers. It's not in a thing. God's not going to make a miracle. God's not going to make a bottle of water appear right here for us. No, but that idea that we had is how God is helping us and answering our prayers that are sincere. So we see that we also have to be aware of that, because some people think, oh no, God never helps me. I always pray and I never get the answers, or I never get any help. But that help is coming, but often we say, oh, I had a great idea. Oh, how lucky am I? Oh, that just happened by chance. But it really is God and the good spirits working to help us when we are being sincere and asking for help. And another section that I brought here is life of contemplation. Not doing good in itself is wrong. So if we just if we just do nothing, say like so I'm gonna devote my life only to worship, but then I go and do nothing, like if I only sit there and worship all day, but I'm not doing any good, then that's also wrong, because God doesn't want us to, he wants us to not do wrong, but on top of that, be doing good. So just not doing wrong, but sitting there not doing good is also wrong. So again, not doing good in itself is wrong. So not only can we be worshiping and saying these things and having this conversation with God, but we need to be putting it into our daily lives and working towards doing the good, because that's what's going to matter. So the next law they talk about is the law of labor. So is the necessity of labor a law of nature? So do we need to work? Is it a necessity? And the spirits answered, labor is a law of nature and is provided by the facts that it is a necessity. Civilizations require humankind to perform a greater amount of labor because it increases the sum of their needs and pleasure. So yes, we need to work. Labor is a law of nature, right? A divine law, something that we have to do in our daily lives. And having civilization requires us to work more. So cavemen, they were only working to live to the next day. They were only working about, okay, what do we have to do to get to the next day, But now with a civilization, now we need to work more, because now we have greater goals and greater things that we need, or pleasures that we have. So with work is how we grow. And we'll see more of that. So individual labor. The spirit labors just like the body. So everything is useful labor. So some people can't physically work, but their spirit and their intelligence still can work. So they work in that manner. Or even if they can't do a work that provides them money, physical money, they can still do a work for the good, helping other people. So the spirit labors just like the body. So even if the physical body seems incapable, there's still labor to be done. Without labor, you would remain in the early stages of intelligence. So labor is how we grow and learn. When you start a new job, you don't know what you're doing, and then you get accustomed to it, and then you learn, and now you're an expert in that area because you had that job. So without labor, without working, we would be doing nothing. And doing nothing, we wouldn't be growing, we wouldn't be improving, and we still be in the early stages. And also in the Spirit's book, they said that it's a means of developing intelligence. So when we labor, that's how we learn with. Okay, well, so the nature of labor is always relative to wants. So depending on our wants is how much we're going to labor. Because if we want to get newer clothes, we're going to work harder so we can get more money so we can go get those new clothes. If we want to have a house, if we want to have a car. So depending on our wants is the nature of our labor. And just like the ants, right? The ants, they need to work to store up or animals in general, store up for the winter, or make a little home for themselves. So they're working based on their wants, right? They want to eat and they need shelter. And we're going to work depending on our wants and needs. And that is what drives us to keep going and to keep doing new things. But then there are limits to labor. So there are points where our physical body can't take it anymore. And so the first one, rest after labor is a necessity. So yeah, we do have to rest. We can't work 24/7 because we know that even though we have our spirit, we have this material body that can't work 24/7. So we do need to rest after labor. But of course, we need to know when it's time to rest, or if we're just being lazy, right? We can't just say, oh yeah, I need to rest. There comes to a point when we need to rest, but we need to make sure it's at the right point. Labor is limited by strength. So again, some people are stronger, so they're going to do labor, maybe a more intensive labor, while someone who is weaker and maybe they can't use their physical body, they're going to do a different kind of labor, helping others, or some maybe research or something that they can do without having to do much physical things. So we all have labor to do, and it depends on our strength. But doesn't mean that strength or weak, any labor is better than the other. The strong should work for the weak. When the family does not help, society should take its place. This is the law of charity. So, and then we think, okay, there are those who are strong, who are working, their bodies can keep going, but there are some who are weak, who can't work, and we need to also help those people. If they're not able to physically work as we are, working is a blessing for us to work and to improve, right? That's how we're improving our intelligence. So if they're not able to have this opportunity to work, we also need to help those people, because that goes back to that law of charity that we were talking about, that it's the most important of the section of the divine law. And when the family doesn't help, that's when society helps. And we see that in our laws, that we're getting closer to that, because we do have laws, human laws in place to help people who have disabilities or people who can't work. So when the family doesn't help, then society also helps those people. And labor in nature. Everything in nature labors. So we labor, and so do the animals, right? Just like the ants. And no one's exempt from labor. And all work that's done is good work. So the work that the ants do, the work that the bees do, right? We know the bees, people are like always shooing away bees, but now people are trying to save bees, because the work they do is so important to the food that we eat, and everything that we have around us. And without bees, there's going to be a big problem with pollination and farming. So even the labor that the bees do is so important to how our lives, to how we live our lives. So everything in nature labors, and each labor is important. Just like in a society, we can't have a society of only doctors and no one's a driver, or no one works at the supermarket, or no one works at the gas station, right? We need someone working everywhere, and together we work. So all these labors are important for us to grow and for our society to grow, which we will be talking more about society. The third one they mention is the law of reproduction. So is reproduction of living beings a natural law? And as we can see, especially from the picture, of course, right? The physical world would die without reproduction. If we didn't have reproduction, then everything would just become extinct and there would be nothing left, especially us. So yeah, reproduction is an important part of nature and how of divine law. So marriage. Marriage, it is progress that has been achieved by humankind. So oftentimes or especially when we're lesser evolved, we just can only think of ourselves, right? Or just like animals, they're only thinking about themselves, how they're going to survive for the next day. So our natural instinct is to protect ourselves and preserve ourselves. But having marriage, now that love your neighbor as yourself, you're at least applying that to one other person. So now you're loving at least that person as yourself. So that is progress that's been achieved by humankind. That's a way that we're starting to open that circle of love your neighbor as yourself. We have at least one person there that we can love, or try to love all the time, the way we love ourselves. And if marriage were abolished, humanity would regress to infancy, because with marriage, we learn how to grow together with someone else, dealing with someone else. And when you have problems, those obstacles are there for you to learn from them and overcome them. So if we didn't have marriage, we would go back. And the same thing if we didn't have work. If we didn't have marriage, we would be at the early stages of intelligence, of infancy, because we wouldn't be learning. Because all of these things, like labor and marriage, help us to grow. And they even said here that if marriage were abolished, we would be to the level of wild animals and savages, because even some animals have partners that they stay with for life, like wolves and other animals. So they have lifelong mates. So even some animals have mates that are with them for their whole lives. So not having that would be a big regression. And then polygamy. So here they talk about when now we're having more than one wife or husband. And they said polygamy is a human invention, the rejection of which marks an era of social progress. So as we're talking about, marriage is how we get together and we grow with one another, learn to deal with one another, and learn how to overcome problems together with other people instead of by ourselves. Polygamy, they see, is very there's no true affection. It's more physical affection. So in that case, it's not helping, because what helps us is that true affection towards one another, that love our neighbor as ourselves. But if it's just a physical attraction, that's not helping us learn in that aspect. And again, it's a human invention, and we know human laws and human rules are always changing and progressing because they're not perfect like God's. Development of the human race. So how we've been evolving. The same spirit has come back to improve themselves in new bodies. So what they were talking about here is how we see civilizations that are disappearing, or groups of people that disappearing or have disappeared in the past. And they're saying it's those same spirits that are coming back. We're improving ourselves and coming back and forming new civilizations that are more improved. So that's why as we see civilizations disappearing or groups of people disappearing, it's those same spirits coming back to that are improved and in new bodies and creating new civilizations from the new knowledge that they learned. And all beings must contribute to help general progress move forward in every way. So we are all helping the earth improve, right? If we don't improve, then the earth won't improve. So all of us are working to improve ourselves, and when we all improve, our society improves, and that's when we get these new, more advanced societies, and these less advanced societies disappear. And we're all helping it to move forward in every way, right? We want all aspects of society to move forward, even like our physical society has changed so much, how houses have evolved over time has changed so much. So everything in our society we are working towards to improve Earth and to get it more evolved. And an example I have here is that in 1950, the population was 2.5 billion. In 2000, 50 years later, it's 6 billion. Then in 2014, it was 7 billion. And now in 2019, it's 7.7 billion. And so we see this population keeps increasing. And people wonder, okay, if the population keeps increasing and increasing, how are we going to fit all these people? Well, of course, God's laws are perfect, right? If he's allowing all these people to fit here, there's a reason for it. And it's because we are getting to be able to live with one another more closely. We're learning how to interact with people and live with people all the time and having constant social interaction. Even if it's harder for us, we're learning from that social interaction and we're able to live together more. So now there's bigger groups of people, while in the past there was like tribes that were only family lines because they didn't live with huge amounts of people. But now we can fit more people because we're living better together. And of course, we still have a long way to go in the way we live better together, so we're not at the end yet. The law of preservation. Is the instinct of self-preservation a law of nature? So the instinct to preserve ourselves and the desire to live. And the Spirit said, of course, regardless of intelligence, it is given to all living creatures. In some, it is purely mechanical, while in others, it is associated with reason. So we know that we have those mechanical those mechanical senses to stay alive, like building a house, building a shelter, like this, like a bird, like an animal. Those mechanical senses, okay, we need to have a shelter so when it rains, we're covered, or we need to go find food, or like animals that stock up for the winter. We need to do that because or else when the winter comes, we're not going to have. So we have this this mechanical, like that instinct to just have food and shelter and those kind of things, like an animal. But we also use our intelligence to understand, oh, okay, I want to evolve, I want to improve myself, so I want to live so I can use this life to the fullest and learn as much as I can. Means of self-preservation. God always provides us the means to live. So there's always what we need to live. It might not be our wants, but our needs are there for us. And when people don't have the means to live, it's because they didn't understand something correctly. They didn't follow that sign, that thought that they had to guide them somewhere. So, but God always provides us the means to live. Everything that we need to live is there for us to preserve ourselves, because preservation is a law of God. Nature is not careless, but humans do not know how to control their use of her bounty. So nature has everything for us, right? God created nature, created all living things, and nature has all we need. But we get careless and we start taking advantage of all these things. Like we know how many animals have gone extinct because humans start overusing these animals to make clothes or something of that sort, or just like when people just kill animals for the fun of it. So we know that humans just take advantage of what nature is giving us. So we have everything that's necessary, but humans are the ones that are that don't know how to control it, don't know how to control what they need versus what they want. So the fruits of the earth. Anything that human beings enjoy in their physical lives are fruits of the earth. So it doesn't mean the physical fruits and vegetables, but everything that we take from nature, the trees that we use to make paper, anything at all that we use are the fruits of the earth that we are using to help our lives. And God made material things attractive to motivate human beings and to test them. So when there are those things that are attractive, oh, I want that shiny new car, I want this new thing. Yeah, they're there, and God allows them to be there because those things motivate us to work harder. If we want to get that new car or whatever it is, we are motivated to work harder to get those things. But at the same time, it's also a test of, do you understand what you need versus what you want? What is a necessity and what is just an extra thing that you don't need? But, and a lot of times people get mixed up in this and they get greedy and selfish and they want everything. So that's why material things being attractive become a test to us that often we fail. And then the necessary and superfluous things. Wise men and women know by intuition. Many others learn through experience. So wise people, they know, okay, I need this and I want that extra. Maybe I shouldn't have that extra. Just like if you're eating cake, right? Someone that knows, it says, okay, I should have a little piece and that's it. Maybe a kid that comes that doesn't know says, I want to eat the whole cake. They eat the whole cake and then they're going to learn from the experience, right? They're going to have a stomachache. They're going to throw up. They're going to feel so sick after that they're going to learn, okay, maybe I shouldn't have the whole cake. Maybe I should only eat a piece. And that's exactly how we go through life with necessary things, but it's not as simple as the cake might be. So when we know, we know, okay, I just want that. That's not necessary versus our necessities. But others, we have to go through the experience of getting those things or not getting those things or losing those things so that we can learn, okay, that wasn't necessary. That, maybe I don't need those things, and maybe they won't positively impact my life. And also, humans have a tendency to make wants that are not real needs. So we think, oh, I need this, But in reality, that's just a want, right? Because what we need, God has given us in nature. But then there's extra stuff that we invent that we need, but they're actually just wants. The law of destruction. Is destruction a law of nature? Everything must be destroyed so that it may be renewed. What you call destruction is only a transformation to renew and improve living beings. So what we see as destruction, such as natural disasters, those are actually ways for us to improve our society, because sometimes the society is stuck. They're not doing anything. They're not having any improvements. But then something hits, and then they have to transform their way of living and improve themselves. And we know that God makes no mistakes, so even the disasters that happen have a reason, have a purpose. So an example that we know of is hurricanes, right? Hurricanes happen all the time. And in places like Florida, they're prepared for hurricanes. And of course, it still devastates some areas, but they're more prepared, so their houses are better built. Their stores, their roads, everything is better built and ready for these hurricanes to hit, so that when it hits, the impact isn't so big. But then when a hurricane hits around here, like Hurricane Sandy, our houses aren't prepared for that. Our buildings aren't prepared for hurricanes because we don't usually experience that. So then, yes, it destroyed like an area and it was devastating, but that's a way for us to rebuild. So now when people are rebuilding, people are making houses sturdier. So if that happens again, we're prepared for those kinds of things. So in simple examples like that is how we, destruction, although devastating, helps to improve our society and helps us progress when we need a little boost. So necessary versus abusive. So premature destruction delays the development of the intelligent principle. So just because some destruction is necessary doesn't mean we should go around and destroy everything. Because just because, a hurricane might come, let me just knock down that house before. That's going to hurt us and we're going to have to repay for that. Destruction is proportionate to the material state of each world. So as worlds get more evolved, they don't need this destruction because they're already in an evolved state. And any improvements they need, they already understand to make those improvements. And the need for destruction decreases in human as their spirit attains control over matter. So as we move away from materialism, as we stop getting so materialistic, the need for destruction decreases because now we're not focusing on all these material things that we usually make our primary focus. War. War is the overpowering of the animal nature over the spirit nature, drives human beings to war. Right? Like when two animals are fighting over something, if they both want the same thing, they instinctively fight over it. So war is that instinctive nature that we have, that animal nature that we have to just attack or and like fight for something. When human beings understand justice, wars will end on earth. When we're thinking more again about loving one another and true justice, true equality, then wars will end because we won't need to fight over things. We'll be able to understand how to work together. And God's purpose in making war necessary is freedom and progress. Again, although it's devastating, it is for us to progress, for us to learn. And another section they put in is capital punishment. The death penalty will disappear over time, and when it does, it will mark progress of the human race. So again, human laws aren't perfect, so they're always improving and making better. So we've already come a long way from how the death penalty is invoked. So when it actually disappears, that will mark a point because that will see that we no longer are being so violent, so in our animal nature, in terms of punishments. And of course, you have to remember, again, going back to that love and charity, is that to forgive your enemies, right? And that's the point that we're getting closer to when we stop having this capital punishment, that people shouldn't have this death penalty if they should be helped to try and learn, to improve themselves and to learn and to become a better person, because we know that the spirit's going to continue. So killing them is not going to do anything. They're going to suffer and they're going to have to keep learning anyway. So they might as well learn now, and we can help them and forgive them for their mistakes, especially because our spirits have all been there already. The law of society. So, is social life founded in nature? Certainly. God made human beings to live in a society. God has given human beings speech and other faculties they need for a social life for a purpose. So, if we were supposed to live by ourselves, completely isolated, we wouldn't need to talk. We wouldn't need speech. But we do have speech. We are supposed to be talking to one another and living in a society. Because it's easy to live alone, to do things by yourself. What's hard is when you encounter other people and have to deal with those people. Necessity of social life. Absolute isolation conflicts with the law of nature. So again, being completely isolated conflicts with nature, right? We shouldn't be isolated. Nature wants us, God wants us to be social and be with one another. Humans must progress. They cannot do it alone because they do not possess all the faculties and need contact with other humans. So we won't learn anything if we don't have that teacher to teach us something. We might learn some things through our mistakes, but we need others to learn from their experiences and what they've gone through, what they know. And we need, just like we were talking about before with the society, we can't have only doctors or only teachers or only supermarket workers. We can't have only supermarkets and nothing else. So we need everyone to work together and learning from one another. Life of isolation. God is not happy with lives that are doomed to not being useful to anyone. So the best of all atonements is to do more good than evil. And as we see, this goes back to what we were previously talking about. So these subcategories of the divine law do all come back together, right? They're all saying the same thing. And really it comes back to that love one another as ourselves, is we need to be doing more good than evil. We need to be improving ourselves, not just standing still. Family ties. Societal ties are necessary for progress, and family ties strengthen social bonds. So even if someone doesn't want to be out in society and deal with those people, they can't stand it, well, they have a family, and that family you're kind of forced to deal with, right? You're forced to learn how to live with those people very closely. So even if someone is not really good at like being out in society, they have that smaller society that they have to learn to deal with. And the other thing we can say is that with the life of isolation, another point is that there are people who can live their lives isolated but go out and do good instead, like Mother Teresa, right? Goes out and does good even when we don't have to. But then there's some people like astronauts that might have a mission to be by themselves for a long period of time, for years or something. And in that case, they're doing something to help society. So that isn't isolation by their choice. So that's the difference also of our intent, which goes back to why we're doing things the way we are. Oops. The law of progress. The march of progress. Humans do not have the power to halt progress. So we can't stop progress. So some people like technology. Some people don't want technology. They refuse to accept it. They refuse to stay updated with it. But they can slow it down a little, but it's going to happen, right? Technology has taken over our lives. So progress is going to happen. You can halt it, but you can't stop what's coming. An excess of wickedness is required to show the need for good and the need for reform. And they're saying, so evil is, things that are bad and wicked are necessary because then we see, okay, that's bad. We want to steer away from that. We want to fix that. We want to improve from that. So although it might seem crazy that we have these bad things, it is all for us to learn. Progress of societal legislation. If laws of nature were properly understood and people were willing to practice them, they would be sufficient. So if we understood the natural laws right here, the divine laws, that would be enough. But we don't understand it, and that's why we have extra human laws that are there. And human laws will become more stable as they approach true justice. So human laws have been improving, and they will continue to improve until one day they get to the divine laws. Influence of Spiritism on progress. Spiritism can contribute to progress by destroying materialism. Spirits have taught many things that human beings have not understood or that they distorted, but that they are now capable of understanding. So Spiritism has come to clarify these things that we're having mistakes on, that we're getting stuck on, so that we can improve and we can continue to improve. And so when we're stuck, Spiritism is there to say, okay, this is how you can get through that problem. The law of equality. Are all humans beings equal in God's eye? Yes, they all have the same goal, and God's laws are for everyone. You often say, the sun shines for everyone, and this expression reveals a truth that is much broader and general than you realize. So, just the way that the sun shines for everyone, God's laws are for all of us. Each and every one of us were created simple and ignorant, and our only difference is the trials that we're going through at the moment, the things that we've done with our free will. But we are all equal, and we're all going towards the same goal. Inequality of aptitudes. God has created all spirits equal, but some have lived longer, consequently acquired more or fewer aptitudes. So, just like Jesus, at that time Jesus came and he was so much more evolved than all of us, still is more evolved. And that's because he had his time to learn and improve and go through all those things to get to that state of perfection. So he had longer time, and we're still, so when we have these inequalities, it's because someone's lived longer, someone's learned longer. Just like we see in school, people that are at a higher grade know more because they've gone through that already, they've learned that already. And spirits who have progressed cannot regress. So once we learn it, it's ours. Trials of wealth and poverty. They are equally dangerous. Poverty inspires complaints against providence, while wealth stimulates all kinds of excess. Spirits themselves select their trials. So, when people think that wealth and poverty, people with wealth, you see them sometimes and they're so miserable. Or people in poverty are so in despair. What am I going to do? I have nothing. Both trials are very big and are very difficult to go through. And that doesn't make one any better than the other. We all have to go through them. And another thing to remember is that we select our trials. When we're in the spirit world, we say, I'm going to improve this in myself. So we select it. So when we're going through a challenge, that's something that we selected for ourselves to go through. So both wealth and poverty are challenges that we have to face. And we are equal. That was our choice of what we were going to go through. Equal rights for men and women. God has given strength to some to protect the weak, but not to reduce them to slavery and suppression. So, physically, men are stronger, right, than women, and that has been why women have been oppressed, or even groups that are stronger than other groups get oppressed because they're weaker. But men and people were not created stronger than others to suppress them. They were created stronger to help those who are weak. And do unto others what you would want others to do to you. So it doesn't matter, men, women, we're all equals, and we want to do what we want to others, do to others what we want to us, to be done to us. No matter what we are, especially because we know we have we reincarnate, and right now we might be a woman, but then we'll be a man, or we'll be a woman again, or so we go through all of this. So that doesn't matter. That's just our physical body. And this example here is really important to show that in the first picture, they each have one box, and they're trying to watch this game over here. this one is not equality, because just because they all have the same box doesn't mean that they can all see the game. What's equality is for the tallest one to not have a box, the medium one to have one box, and the shortest one to have two boxes. So it doesn't mean we all need to have the same thing. It's working towards the needs of everyone. So for us to have the same rights, right? Everyone should be able to watch the game. So it's not about how many boxes we have, that we all have the same box, but that everyone can see the game. So that's where we also get confused with equality. The law of freedom. Freedom of thought. Unbounded freedom of thought, as there is no obstacle to thought. While it may be hindered, thought cannot be extinguished. And here I put a picture of Stephen Hawking, who got gradually paralyzed over decades. But he was an English theoretical physicist, a cosmologist, an author, a professor, a director of research, all at the University of Cambridge. So just because our physical body might not be working, we have that freedom of thought, and we're able to use that thought for good. And even if it can be hindered, it can be extinguished. We all have that freedom of thought. Free will. Without free will, there would be nothing more. They would be nothing more than machines, and they meaning us. The spirits are telling this to us. So we have that free will, that freedom of thought to think whatever we want to think, because or else we would be doing everything that we have to do, because we wouldn't have freedom of thought. We wouldn't have this free will. And natural freedom. An individual never enjoys absolute freedom because all of you need one another, from the most powerful to the most impoverished. So we can never have absolute freedom, right? Absolute freedom would be us completely by ourselves, but we know we need one another. So there's always going to be things that we're not absolutely free because we need to respect the rights of others. Just like if everyone was by themselves, you wouldn't have to wear clothes. But we're with one another, so you respect that we're with other people, so you wear clothes. So you can never have that absolute freedom when we're in a society together. But that doesn't mean we even want that absolute freedom, because we know that we work together and improve ourselves when we are together. And the last one, again, is the law of justice, love, and charity. Natural rights and justice. God has placed it in the heart of all human beings. So we all have that love, justice, and charity within us, and it's just about how we use it or how we ignore it. Justice is respect for the rights of each and every individual. Again, it doesn't matter who's weak, who's strong, who's a man, who's a woman, whatever it is, justice is respect for all. If you're only giving justice to a certain group of people, then that's not justice. And again, it's for the rights of each and every individual, like the little benches. It's not about everyone having the same bench, the same amount, but everyone being able to see the game, having the right to see the game. Natural rights are the same for everyone, from the smallest to the greatest. So these rights are the same. We all have the same rights as individuals, no matter where we are in our lives. Charity and loving your neighbor. Charity is the benevolence for everyone, indulgence towards the imperfections of others, and forgiveness of offenses. So, again, everyone. The key word is everyone, and we have to be, we have to have this charity and love for all, and forgive the offenses of all. And that's where it gets hard. That's where we see marriage is our first step, right, to that, or being in a family is our first step to that, because we have those few people that we're trying to love as ourselves. But we have to extend that. Our goal is to extend that to everyone. Love one another is the divine law by which God governs all the worlds of the universe. Again, that's how important that one law is. If we all love one another, we'll be on the right path, because that is what God uses to govern everything. And then do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So when you're doing these acts of kindness, this charity, this love towards other people, it's not because we want to brag to someone else, oh, look, I did this. And we often do. We often do want to be like, yeah, we did this great thing. But again, it's our intent. Did we do it to help that other person, to love that other person, or just to show off to other people? So, and God can see right through that. So there's no point in really doing that. So with loving one another and having this charity and justice and incorporating all the rules, we want to make sure that we are doing the best we can and having the right heart and having the right intent. Taking positive steps. When you find yourself on the verge of despair, quicken your steps forward, inhibiting your pause. Pray to God for more light in order to overcome the shadows. Do something positive beyond the weakness that you may find within yourself. Read an enlightened message that may heighten your reasoning in the constructive variance of ideas. Be in contact with people whose conversations will enhance your inner spiritual self. Seek out an environment that would be conducive to receiving ennobling inspirations. Do someone a favor, particularly to someone who you have been avoiding for a long time. Go visit a friend who is ill, seeking a little comfort in those who are facing far greater difficulties than yours. Complete your prior unfulfilled tasks that may be causing these clouds of discouragement. Be assured that we are all marching forward, overcoming problems and struggles as we acquire experience. Life accepts our pauses for the restoration of our energy, but it does not accept any moments of inertia. André Luis Francisco Candido Xavier. Thank you all. Have a good night.